She was only 17, a young girl from a quiet town in New York, standing at the edge of adulthood with her whole life ahead of her. She had just graduated high school, excited about the future, exploring new friendships, new experiences, and finding her voice in the online world. On the evening of July 13th, 2019, she left home for a night out at a concert. To her family, it was just another summer night. But within hours, everything would change. By the next morning, police lights painted the streets of Utica. A call had come in, reports of violence. And as the truth began to surface, it revealed a tragedy that spread far beyond that small city. Images no family should ever see began appearing on social media feeds. Strangers across the internet stumbled upon them before her loved ones even knew what had happened. A crime that should have remained private instead became a spectacle of horror, shared in real time. How does a night filled with music and laughter end in such devastation? How does love turn into obsession, an obsession into an irreversible act of violence? And what happens when the cruelty of one moment is amplified by the eyes of the entire world? Bianca grew up in Utica, New York, a small city, quiet, familiar, the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other. To her family, she was more than just a teenager. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend whose presence brought light into their home. At 17, she had just walked across the graduation stage, her cap and gown marking the beginning of adulthood. For her family, it was a moment of pride. For Bianca, it was a glimpse into the future she had been dreaming of. She had passions just like any teenager. She loved anime and gaming, often finding community in online spaces where she could be herself. Her creativity flowed through art and photography. She had spoken about studying psychology, a field where she could better understand people and maybe even help those who struggled silently, just as she had at times. Bianca wasn't perfect. She faced her own battles with mental health, something she shared with close friends online. But her honesty about those struggles only made her more relatable, more human to those who knew her. Yet, the world Bianca was stepping into was changing. The internet offered connection, but it also created distance, a space where personas could blur with reality and friendships could shift into something more complicated. Bianca had begun to gain a following, small communities of people who admired her. To some, she was an inspiration. To others, she was more than just a screen name. And for one person in particular, those blurred lines between admiration and obsession would have devastating consequences. Bianca's story is not just about who she lost her life to, but about who she was before that night. A young woman with dreams, navigating a world where online and offline lives had become inseparable. Her story reminds us that behind every headline, there is a person full of life and hope. Like many teenagers of her generation, Bianca spent time online. For her, it was more than a pastime. It was a way to connect, to share art, to talk about her favorite music, anime, and games. Social platforms like Instagram, Discord, and gaming servers gave her a space to belong. But in those same spaces, connections could form quickly, sometimes too quickly, and not always in ways that were safe. Among the people she came to know online was a 21-year-old named Brandon Clark. At first glance, Brandon seemed ordinary, another young man looking for companionship in the digital world. But beneath the surface, his life was complicated. He had grown up with instability, moving between households, facing an abusive environment, and struggling to find his own sense of worth. To outsiders, he could seem charming and helpful, but those who knew him closely noticed something else, a deep insecurity, an overwhelming need to control how others saw him. When Brandon met Bianca, he saw someone kind, someone who listened, someone who didn't judge. What began as friendship soon turned into something heavier in his mind. To Bianca, Brandon was just one of several friends she spoke with, a companion she sometimes spent time with. But to Brandon, she was becoming his focus. He followed her posts, her online interactions, her life, not just with interest, but with intensity. And as Bianca continued to grow socially, both online and offline, Brandon's feelings shifted. The more independence she showed, the more attention she received from others. the more his jealousy began to rise. Friends later recalled that Bianca was open about not being romantically involved with him. But to Brandon, that rejection seemed impossible to accept. By early summer of 2019, there were signs that this bond was no longer balanced. Conversations turned tense. Arguments sparked over who Bianca spent time with, both online and in person. She remained her independent self, but Brandon's fixation deepened. It was a connection that had started like so many others in digital spaces, but it was slowly transforming into something far more dangerous. And on the night of July 13th, at a concert Bianca had been looking forward to, that hidden tension was about to erupt in ways no one could have predicted. The evening of July 13th, 2019, began like any other night out for Bianca Devins. She had been looking forward to the concert in Queens, a chance to see friends, enjoy music, and step outside the quiet rhythm of her hometown. Brandon Clark joined her that night, though their relationship had grown increasingly strained. Bianca had also made plans to meet another friend at the concert, someone she had known online and had grown close to. To her, it was just another friend, someone she trusted. To Brandon, however, it became a spark of tension he could not ignore. Witnesses later recounted that Brandon seemed on edge from the start. Small gestures, a frown, a sudden shift in tone, a tight grip on her arm, hinted at his growing unease. Bianca, meanwhile, laughed and danced, unaware of the storm quietly building beside her. She moved through the crowd, taking in the lights, the music, and the energy of the evening. Her attention split between enjoying the moment and staying present with her friends. Brandon's mood darkened as the night wore on. Every glance Bianca gave to another friend, every interaction online that she referenced in passing, seemed to chip away at his control. People in the crowd noticed him leaning closer, speaking sharply, but Bianca, ever polite, tried to calm him. And then the concert ended. Lights dimmed, the crowd dispersed, and the night, which had started with excitement and laughter, began to shift. What followed after the music stopped would become a nightmare for Bianca, her family, and a world watching through a screen. As they left the venue and made their way back, the tension that had been quietly building erupted in ways no one could have imagined. Every word exchanged, every step taken in the darkened streets, brought them closer to the moment that would shock the nation. But before we reveal what happened, it is important to pause to understand the gravity of the night that was about to unfold. After leaving the concert, Bianca and Brandon returned to Utica. What had started as a night of excitement was now charged with tension. Conversations between them grew strained. Witnesses would later describe that Brandon seemed more withdrawn, his focus entirely on Bianca. Every word, every small gesture carried weight. In the early hours of July 14th, tragedy struck. In the privacy of a vehicle, away from the crowd and the lights of the city, Bianca's life was taken. The details of that night are horrific, yet the true shock came after, when images of her body were shared online. In seconds, a private tragedy became public, spreading across social media platforms and reaching people who had never known her. Her family, devastated, learned of her death through these images, seeing their daughter's life ended in ways no one could imagine. Friends were left in disbelief, scrolling through feeds they had once associated with harmless fun, now confronted with the darkest consequences of obsession and unchecked jealousy. The world watched in horror, but amid the public outcry, Bianca's humanity could not be erased. She was remembered as a bright, creative young woman whose life had been cut tragically short. And while the night ended in unspeakable loss, it also raised difficult questions about the dangers of social media, the vulnerability of young people online, and how quickly trust can be broken. Following the tragic events of that night, law enforcement acted quickly. Brandon Clark was located near the scene after an attempted suicide. Authorities arrested him without further incident, but the shock of the crime had already rippled across communities far beyond Utica. The public response was immediate and intense. Social media feeds were flooded with tributes, memorials, and outrage. People struggled to comprehend how a young life could end so abruptly, and how images of her death had been circulated online before her family even knew. For many, it raised urgent questions about the role of technology in amplifying tragedy. The legal proceedings began shortly thereafter. Brandon was charged with second-degree murder. In court, details of his troubled past, unstable upbringing, and escalating obsession with Bianca were presented. Ultimately, he pled guilty, accepting a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. But beyond the courtroom, Bianca's story continued to resonate. Her family, while grieving, spoke publicly about her life, her passions, and the need to raise awareness about online safety. Friends and advocates began discussions about laws to prevent the exploitation of young people online, sometimes referred to as Bianca's Law. In the wake of her death, Bianca's memory became a rallying point, a reminder of the real human cost behind the headlines, and the lasting consequences when obsession meets opportunity in the digital age. Bianca Devins' story did not end with her death. In the months and years that followed, her life became a symbol, not of the tragedy itself, but of the potential consequences of unchecked obsession and the fragile boundary between online connection and reality. Her family, though forever grieving, used her story to advocate for awareness and change. They spoke openly about the dangers of social media, about the importance of watching for warning signs in relationships, and about protecting young people from online exploitation. Memorials, tributes, and online campaigns help keep Bianca's memory alive, reminding the world of the person behind the headlines, her passions, her creativity, and the life she had begun to build. Her story also raised broader questions. How do we navigate an age where personal tragedies can be shared instantly across the globe? How do we recognize the signs before an obsession turns violent? And perhaps most importantly, how do we honor those who are lost while learning from the circumstances that led to their death? Bianca's life, though tragically short, continues to teach us about compassion, vigilance, and the human need to connect safely, lessons that are as vital today as they were the night she was taken from us. Bianca Devins' life and death left an indelible mark on her family, her friends, and a world watching through screens. Her story is a reminder of how fragile life can be and how important it is to pay attention to the people around us, both online and offline. If this story made you pause, reflect, or think about the impact of social media and obsession, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Discussions like these can help prevent future tragedies. And if you want to hear more true crime stories told with care, respect, and depth, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories, more lessons, and more lives to remember. For our next video, we'll explore another chilling case where online connections turn deadly and the lines between trust and danger blurred in ways no one expected. You won't want to miss it.